So Matt, would you consider yourself to be more of an Italian sausage person or a smoked sausage person?
I think of those two. I think Italian sausage.
I think that I would also consider myself more of an Italian sausage person. All right, welcome to an off-season D3 Datacast. Matt, I feel like every year that we've done the show now, we feel like we're actually going to take an off-season, and for some reason, you come up with some crazy idea to do like a 500 plus trading card set, or like the tournament selection process changes, and so we need to start digging into NPI, and you need to have like a minor mental health breakdown trying to crack the code and get all the systems set up and so it just doesn't really happen. I feel like we've had an off season so far. We eased into it. We had a lot of fun doing the Great Lakes Invitational pairing reveal, talking about the matchups. Looking forward to that great event next season. We got out our top 10 D3 dunks. Our ranking video of the top 10 D3 dunks we saw over the course of last season, and now here we are. It's June. We're gonna do another off-season episode. So we finally kept to like the one video per month pace of the off season that we wanted to get to. Here, it only took us into our third off season.
Well, Zach, I'm excited for the offseason. It's good to get a little bit of a break. We love D3 basketball, but it's been a full month since we crowned the champion in Fort Wayne for the national. It's been
2 months.
It's been two
Almost.
Wait, it's been
Yeah.
3 months since we've crowned the champion. We took a little bit more of a break than maybe is healthy here, but we're happy to get back into it today. Zach, we're going to talk about how that season ended up. We went through our first year of NPI. Did NPI get the right teams? That's what we want to talk about today, Zach. It's a timely topic because just as I said, 1 month ago, we finished that tournament. 3 months ago, we finished that tournament. So it's time to jump back
There was
into
a
the
tournament
NPI.
at some point, and it was in the past. We are now here in June 2025. I don't know any more specifics than that. Clearly, we're rusty and in off-season mode and not in our normal weekly cadence, and that is much to our detriment, Matt. All right, well, but anyway, we continue to do what we do in large part because we have a great team of supporters behind us, helping us do what we do. Matt, let's give a shout out here to our supporters through the Patreon platform at patreon.com/D3Datacast. Sticking with us through the off season, and it's great to see.
Yeah, we've had all along, Zach, our $3 good job team, our $5 a month great job team tier. We're thankful for everyone who has supported at either of those. If you would like to support us that way through Patreon, go to patreon.com/D3Datacast. It's on your screen. We appreciate all the support, those who've joined with us. Zach, behind the scenes, you and I have been talking about some maybe extra Patreon tier, something else if for teams or programs that would like to dive into NPI a little bit more with us, maybe give them some dedicated time, maybe a specially priced package that we can maybe give some more specialized information on that. So probably details out in the future, but if you're interested in that at all, maybe reach out to us and we'll give you a little preview of what we might be thinking about. And we'll talk about what we can do to maybe optimize your schedule a little bit better, or answer any questions you might have of how you should be creating that schedule as you look forward to the 2025-26 season and beyond.
For sure, on a program like this, we're able to talk in generalities a lot, but Matt, we've been thinking about some ways that we might be able to help on a more specific, individualized basis. And like you said, more to come on that, but looking forward to it.
This show, as we always say, this is not tax or investment advice. This is for informational purposes only. So, invest with caution here.
Right. Informational purposes may or may not be for entertainment purposes. All right. So as you talked about, Matt, we're gonna look back at the tournament. We're gonna look at who got in, who was left out, and ask the big question. We'll see if we can answer the big question. But did NPI select the right teams? It's a bit of a loaded question. And Matt, as we were talking, I think it was important to convey that there's definitely you can definitely get the wrong teams in, but I don't know that you can ever really say with certainty whether or not you got the right teams in. So let's talk about it a little bit more. Looking back at NPI, we're going to be specific to men's basketball here. I know that there's some other great work out there that you could look to for other sports. Women's basketball in particular, I know Scott Peterson is always doing great work on that side. So going to be a little bit more men's basketball focused here. But I think as we've always talked about NPI, there's certain things about it, the way it works that may be applicable, beyond even the specific scope we're talking today.
Yeah, that's right. And we will, as we typically do on the show, have a men's basketball focus here. So you can extrapolate to some other sports, but probably not all sports. And maybe we'll talk about that in a little bit of a discussion section at the end. So, Zach, this offseason, you and I had been contacted by some people in various sports, some basketball-related people, some other sport-related people, talking about maybe some concerns they had with NPI and thinking that the best teams were not highly rated by NPI or maybe getting left out of tournament selections. So we wanted to talk about that exact topic today. So we know in men's basketball, women's basketball too, we have some really high quality computer metrics that give us an insight. We never know who exactly are the best teams, but like the D3Hoops.com top 25 poll has 25 people who take voting seriously, and they try to rank the top 25 teams in order from the 25th best to the first best, or at least that's how I approach the top 25 poll. We also have the Massey ratings, kind of the OG in this space, I think, of a computer rating system that uses objective data to try to rank the teams in an order, in a rating system. Us at D3 Datacast, d3datacast.com, we run efficiency ratings for men's and women's basketball, trying to answer that question: who's the best offenses, who's the best defenses, who are the best overall teams in Division III basketball. Jacob Schauer, a D3 basketball player, former player, runs his own computer ratings. He does a great job as well. He has objective data. So none of these are perfect, but they all give a good idea of who are the best teams. But I think a good computer system is very often somewhat or very agnostic to actual win and loss record. You're looking a little bit more at scores, scoring margin, and strength of schedule. Who did you play to see who are the better teams? Not necessarily just did you win the most games. So if you play a road game in particular against a very highly rated team and you lose by a bucket, right? You lost that game, but a computer system might say that you're a really good team. And these systems are typically designed to be more predictive of future results than necessarily describing what happened. So I think that's important to keep in mind when you're talking about many of these computer rating systems. Winning matters because when you win games, you are more likely to be better depending on who you played. But it's more focused on what is the scoring margin and who did you play. So maybe the win-loss doesn't always matter that much when you're trying to find who are the best teams. You're going to take losses because you're going to be playing really good games and you're going to be playing competitive in those. And those are kind of some of the ways that you identify who the best teams are. Of course, you're going to win a lot of games along the way because if you are a good team, but you might lose competitive games as well, and that's okay for some of these computer rating systems. So I think, Zach, let's look at what the data looked like, right? So I took a snapshot. I had it saved, Massey ratings from the Sunday tournament selection Sunday, right? So the selections came out Monday, but Sunday was the last day of the regular season. And then we had our efficiency ratings from through conference tournament play, so going into the national tournament. I would have loved to include the Jacob Schauer ratings, but I didn't have a snapshot of his rankings from that data. So I'm not going to include that here. But here's a table on your screen. Hopefully you can see it okay, but it's 1 through 21 of the Pool C qualifiers. So I tried to eliminate the Pool A teams, the automatic qualifiers, and just say who was selected by NPI in the next 21 at-large teams. They're ranked in order here. And then what was their Massey rank among teams that were just left on the Pool C table, and what was their D3 Datacast efficiency ratings rank. So you can see in the top 10 in NPI, that's Wesleyan through Wash U, all three systems would have had all of these teams in the top 21. So NPI, Massey ratings, efficiency, if you used any of these to pick the tournament fields, right, they would have all picked these same top 10 teams somewhere along the process. So kind of the top half of Pool C, these were all going to get in no matter what these computer systems would have said. Now there starts to be a little bit of disagreement the further on you go on the list. So starting with Ramapo, down there, they were the Pool C number 11 by NPI. They would have been outside of the top 21 by both the Massey ratings and the efficiency ratings. Now, really close on efficiency ratings, number 22, first team out, but they would have missed maybe by both of those metrics. Carthage in by Massey ratings, out by efficiency ratings. Stockton, another team that maybe would have missed kind of by both. and Cal Lutheran would have missed by efficiency ratings, would have been in by Massey ratings. TCNJ, another NJAC team, our third NJAC team mentioned here, would have just missed by both Massey ratings and efficiency ratings. Catholic would have been outside by Massey, but not efficiency rating. And then Gettysburg, who was the last team into the field, would have missed by both Massey ratings and efficiency ratings. So all these teams were maybe close to the discussion, the Pool C discussion line, but there was some disagreement in the back half of this Pool C picture between maybe what the computer ratings said and what NPI said. And I think this maybe caused some people a little bit of concern of, hey, is NPI getting these teams right if these other computer systems don't maybe have all of the same teams in what would have been the tournament field?
Some high level things I picked out as I was looking at this list. 14 out of 21 had unanimous agreement between the two computer rankings here and NPI. Hey, get 2/3 of anyone to agree on anything these days, Matt. I think you're off to a pretty good start. 17 out of 21 of the NPI picks had at least one of the computer rankings on its side. And none of the NPI at-large picks, Matt, I would consider as extreme outliers, right? So we're talking about differences here, but I think we're talking about differences all within the same neighborhood. You pointed out as we went along the way here, 3 of those 4 that were not in agreement with at least one of either the efficiency ratings or the Massey ratings were from the NJAC. The other one is Gettysburg. I think some examples we'll talk about maybe why those are the case here as we go along. Well, let's just get into it a little bit here, Matt, because I think we noted this at the time that the NJAC kind of the NJAC seemed like the 2005 version of what we saw from the American Rivers Conference in 2004, right? A bunch of good teams whose best wins largely came among each other, right? Once they got into conference play. Now that's a little bit unfair because I think the NJAC did perform better out of conference than that 2024 American Rivers, conference group of teams did. In particular, to note here, Matt, that let's check my notes here. TCNJ did have a non-conference win against Drew, who had a very nice season, and Stockton actually had 3 non-conference wins against NPI top 50 teams, right? So the more your non-conference group can bring the more your conference group can bring really good or just basically volume of non-conference wins into conference play, the more you can really beat up on each other and still come out looking good. I think that's a dynamic we saw in the old system that I think the NCHAC showed us is still at play here under NPI.
Yeah, and I think you're right. So the teams that are going to be in tournament contention, so here we saw like Stockton and Ramapo and TCNJ, Montclair State make the tournament. Those teams are going to need to win a lot of non-conference games and get some quality wins in that mix. And I think you're right. I think those NJAC teams did do that. Another thing that really helps your conference, it helped it in the old system, it still helps it in NPI. The teams maybe in the bottom half that are probably not going to be in as much of tournament consideration, if they can still go out and get non-conference wins, they don't always have to be the best wins in that standpoint, but that still lifts your whole conference. So if you get a lot of wins and your NPI becomes reasonable, but you're kind of in that back half of your conference, then when those top teams play you and probably get a bunch of wins, they're not going to beat you every time, but if those top teams kind of beat you 3/4 of the time, they're going to end up with good NPIs as a result of that. So I think, and we haven't done a deep dive on the NJAC, but I think you're right. I think they were able to get some good wins in there, some really solid wins, but also I think as a conference, they just performed really well at getting a stable of wins under their belt, and that kind of lifted them as the season went on as a conference, as a league, a little bit higher than maybe some of the other computer systems would have had them, because NPI values the win a little bit more than maybe Massey and efficiency would, just in the binary win-loss aspect of it.
And then I mentioned that I feel like there weren't necessarily any outliers. Maybe the closest thing to an outlier in the NPI at-large selections was Gettysburg, but I think that's a case that we can be okay with. We'll talk about that a little bit more, Matt. Let's go into the next slide here where you've got it broken down. Instead of like the full list, we take a look a little bit more kind of around the cut line, both above and below.
Yeah, so here's a list of some of those bigger outliers who had more disagreement between the computer systems and NPI, and then kind of the next several teams on the list, as well as maybe some teams that would have made it by one system or the other. So, like Gustavus Adolphus, just on the outside of the cut line by NPI, just outside on Massey ratings as well. Kind of maybe in maybe the next group back by efficiency ratings. Here we see Virginia Wesleyan, a team that was in the top 16 by both Massey ratings and efficiency ratings, not coming in by NPI. Trine out of the MIAA would have been in the top 12 by both Massey ratings and efficiency ratings, but they were outside on NPI. Trinity, Texas is another team that had the 2 out of 2 computer systems, Massey ratings and efficiency ratings, but NPI did not did not look quite as favorably on their overall resume as some of the other teams.
All right, so let's go back to that Gettysburg discussion, Matt. And as I was diving into Gettysburg a little bit, even though they maybe look like a little bit more of an outlier, I feel like we need to talk about, is this the kind of team that we're actually okay with getting in, even though maybe the computer ratings don't necessarily agree or see them as that at-large selection. And if you just break down, like, what do you want to see out of a team that gets a tournament spot, right? So Gettysburg, they had an elite non-conference win at Hampton-Sydney, right? So they've got that top level win, no bad losses, no losses outside the top 100. Now you could say, now for a team getting an at-large bid, I'd like to see a better than a 5-7 record inside that NPI top 100. But here, they're the last team in by NPI, and as you start getting down there, there's going to be some warts. Maybe that's their wart. But it's balanced out by that elite win, a road win, which, that road factor does come into play here and with the men's basketball dials. And just no losses outside the NPI top 100. One of the things with NPI that we've talked about is it's not only about winning and losing, but it's about, which particular games were the wins, were the losses, right? It's not like the old days where we're just looking at winning percentage and strength of schedule in aggregate, right? So it's avoiding those bad losses. That becomes more important now than it's ever been, and Gettysburg was able to do that.
Yeah, we know in the way the math works for NPI, a bad loss will really drag down your overall NPI because it would have been a lower NPI to begin with, and then not getting the win portion of that at all is going to really, drag down your NPI. That's maybe another game you can't drop from a win that would have been because your NPI is too much lower. So in some ways, avoiding bad losses is as good. It's a way to increase your NPI as really good wins. So that's one way to do it. Gettysburg did avoid those bad losses. So the computer systems were like, yeah, maybe not the most elite team in the country, still good, right? They're still top 40 team by both of these, or top 40, I guess, Pool C type teams. But they're not maybe that kind of top 20-ish, but NPI, the way the NPI math works is, and we'll see this when we go further on some different slides, some different looks at this sort of thing. Gettysburg is the type of team that ends up looking good on more of a resume metric type of a view.
The other thing that I thought about looking at some of these names and again, thinking back to as we were tracking it late in the season, we're with NPI, you're building a total resume, right? But I think back to some really devastating losses some of these teams took late in the season. Gustavus, they got that big win over St. John's, and then they followed up. They go 0-2 against Carleton, right? And they finished just below the cut line. Win either of those games against Carleton, and they're going to be getting, they're getting that bid ahead of a Gettysburg. Virginia Wesleyan. We were tracking that. It was going to be an or situation, not an and situation there likely for some of the teams there in the ODAC. And they had, admittedly, it's always a tough 4-5 quarterfinal game there in the ODAC tournament. That was a home game they had, but they really got manhandled there at home in that 4-5 game in the ODAC quarters by Guilford. Real lost opportunity for them. Win that game, and
That's
they're going to be in the
play-in game for
regardless.
them,
right? Regardless of what happened in the semifinals, they probably would have been in. Anderson lost a late regular season game to Berea, who was outside the top 200. Whitworth had a loss at Whitman, who finished number 197, and they had 4 total losses actually outside the top 160. Right, so
Right.
Sometimes a system like NPI, you hear criticisms like, "Oh, it should be decided on the court." Well, some of these teams right below the cut line, it was decided on the court because they lost
Yeah.
a game every team's going to lose games. It's going to happen, but there's really specific examples of games that teams would like to have back, or maybe they win that game
Yeah.
7 times out of 10, but one of those 3 was on that particular day, and they're on the wrong side of the cut line as a result.
Yeah, and Anderson specifically, I think, would have been like a version of Gettysburg. They were a team that maybe was going to be, not the greatest overall resume, not the strongest overall schedule, but maybe would have avoided like a no bad losses type of a thing, and maybe just snuck in. You can see that their NPI rank was higher than either Massey ratings or efficiency ratings had them, but then taking that loss to Berea, kind of a 50 percentile or lower team in Division Three, that really hurt their NPI, and it put them just a couple of spots below the cut line. They were like a no bid thieves team kind of by the last weekend, maybe going into Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They got a couple too many, and they were on the outside. They really couldn't. I mean, and they probably all know it, right? Like, we can't lose that game and get into the tournament, and that's what happened. So you can't. If you don't have the strongest schedule, you can't take the bad losses, and that's what we saw here. And for Anderson specifically, neither the two computer ratings that we have on the screen or NPI had them in. Both had them as a good team, but not quite in the tournament picture there.
And it highlights another really interesting thing with NPI. Previously, we were looking at just these large buckets of winning percentage and strength of schedule and results versus regionally ranked. No one could ever really say for certain, what might have been different if you change the result. With NPI, as we were tracking that bubble watch
Yeah.
going down the last, few weeks, it was very clear what some of these scenarios were involving the teams that I mentioned, right? Gustavus gets one win against Carleton in those 2 games. They would have been in. You can say that. So there's no like, oh, what could we have done differently? What should we have done differently? In these cases of these first few teams left out, it's very clear what they
Yeah.
could have done
Yeah.
differently.
It's almost always there's one more game you could have won. And it might have been that specific game, or it could have been another game earlier, but basically one more win on your schedule would have gotten you in. And like you mentioned Gustavus, right? Going 0-2 the season finale against Carleton, and then in the tournament, I think it was the semifinal maybe against Carleton, losing both of those, that really, really killed their chances. All right, so Zach, that was kind of a look at how NPI stacks up against maybe two systems that are more explicitly trying to figure out who the best teams in Division 3 are. And I think we're talking about very similar types of teams, but we're not talking about the exact teams. And we're not really talking about the same teams in the same order all that much once we're past kind of the elite teams. So let's take a look at I know this conversation in all sports can get kind of tiresome sometimes. We hear about it with the college football playoff committee, and are they trying to find the best teams or the most deserving teams? And they kind of say they're trying to find the best teams a lot of times. I think what NPI is doing, and Zach, I think this is my preference. I don't know about you, but they're trying to develop a team resume type metric to determine who are maybe more the most deserving teams. And that can be kind of nebulous because everyone's going to kind of disagree on which teams are more or less deserving to get into the tournament. But it's not, I don't think it's explicitly saying we think these are the next best 21 teams in Division 3 in terms of who's more likely to beat team X, Y, or Z in any game. I don't think that's what NPI is doing. And I don't personally think that that's what NPI necessarily should do as far as selecting teams into a tournament. So just thinking about what are like team resume type metrics, I'm lumping NPI into this category. There's kind of a concept that I first heard about through Drew Pasteur, D3 Bubble. Under the previous system, he did a lot of work with kind of the winning percentage and the strength of schedules and probabilities that team make it into the tournament. And he would come up with kind of a wins over bubble metric. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit going forward. There's also like a strength of record metric, which would talk about what would the probability that another team, let's say like in the top 25, would have a better record than the team in question given who they played. So both wins over bubble and strength of record would use like a team quality metric like an efficiency ratings as its backbone, and then look at actual results and actual maybe like win probabilities of a hypothetical team against a specific schedule to come up with a metric. So for these types of rating systems or team resume metrics, wins and losses are very important. but also keeping context of the quality of opponent is very important. But I think these things are designed to be more descriptive of results already played. We saw that the like a Massey ratings or an efficiency ratings are a little bit more prescriptive. So like, what do we think would happen given what we know about these teams going forward, or based on what the true strength of these teams are? I think what NPI's trying to do more than to look forward is trying to look back at what results are already in the bucket and try to describe what happened for each team and come up with a number that is descriptive of the not the team's strength, but the strength of the team's resume that they have compiled so far.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And as you're going through it, I was trying to think about you as a top 25 human voter. I feel like you're trying to weigh these two things and come to kind of some sort of middle ground, right? Obviously, you're the man behind the D3 Datacast efficiency ratings, right? So you value that portion of it, which is trying to be a little bit more forward looking, perhaps based on the results so far. And so if you lose a game, let's say you lose to the number one team by a basket, well, that's going to be informative. It's going to say you're probably pretty good, right? But do you give full credit for that? Probably not, right? Whereas something like this that's looking back and is more concerned with wins and losses may give even less credit, right? So there's a reason we go through things that are like efficiency ratings based on a weekly basis during the season, and why we also look at your top 25 ballot, right? Because they're not the same thing on a given week, right? You're not just printing out 1 through 25 from the efficiency ratings and turning that in as your ballot. And so I don't know, maybe you can add a little commentary on this, but I feel like, yeah, certainly you're using the efficiency ratings as a tool, but ultimately, as a human voter in the top 25 poll, you're kind of trying to come down in the middle ground between like these most deserving teams and like best teams. Is that accurate? That's just kind of what struck me
Yeah,
as you were talking about it.
I would say for me, most of the season, I'm trying to do like my own mental version of a computer rating system, right? Which is I take computer systems into account, but then I do like, oh, I've watched these teams and I actually think this team's better than this team, and it may or may not prove to be true. Really late in the season, maybe only like the last two ballots, I flip that a lot more towards a resume. You get to the end of the season, all the games are in the book. There's not a whole lot of looking forward. Now there's differences. Like if you're thinking about just like the national tournament, you're playing in different sides of the bracket. You're playing different competition. It's not like how far did you get just necessarily, but I flip more, especially at the top of my ballot. What resume did you put together at the end of the season? Did you win the national championship? Guess what? That counts for a whole lot. You're going to be number one. Did you make the Final Four? Did you make the national championship game? Like that's going to count for a whole lot. Making the Sweet 16, that's a big deal. The Elite Eight, that's a big deal. So late in the season, I flip more toward most deserving, because then my top 25 ballot at the end of the day, I feel like more describes the season that we just saw. But up until that point, I'm more thinking of, still, I think this team's better than this team. I don't care that this team is 22-3 and this team is 16-6. Like I think that 16 win team is better. I'm going to vote them higher, maybe. So it's only very late for me that flips. So with this kind of maybe more deserving, and I think I fall myself into this camp here. Let's look at similar slides to what we just saw. But I'm going to compare NPI to my version of wins over bubble, and I'll tell you what that means for me. So I just defined like the hypothetical bubble cutoff team as the overall number 40 team in the country. So then, and for some of the season, like that ended up being like Mount Union, which was a team that was maybe in the bubble picture and just kind of out by the last couple of weeks. I don't know who ended up as actually number 40, but I just remember Mount Union stuck out to me. Kind of late-ish in the season, they were kind of around that zone. So I just define who's ever number 40 as my bubble team, and I take every team in the country's schedule and I compare what a hypothetical expected result would be given their schedule against the number 40 team. So if they're playing the number one team in the country, that's probably only like a 10% win probability, right? So if you win that game, you get plus 0.9 wins because you were expected to only win 10% of the time, but you won it, so you get the 90% that was left over. If you If you lose a 50-50 game, then you get minus half a win because the bubble team was expected to win that game half the time and lose the game half the time. So you do that process for every team in the country, and you add up their plus minus. So you can see Wesleyan was the top team going into the tournament. They had 10 wins over bubble. They finished 21-6 against Division III. So you would expect from their schedule, which was pretty difficult, they play in the NESCAC, you would expect a bubble team. 26-1. What did I say?
21-6.
You would expect the bubble team to basically be 16-11 against that schedule. So more or less, right? Like Wesleyan came up with 10 more wins more than a bubble team would be expected. And you can see as it goes down that drops a lot. And by the time you're getting to the bottom of the list, you're talking about like a win or two over the bubble team, and that makes sense. The bubble, we're trying to get about where the bubble would be. So you should be pretty close to that.
The bubble teams are about on the bubble.
Yes.
Right.
And so you can just look at this list and see what is the agreement or disagreement about who's actually getting the wins compared to what a bubble team would be expected in a theoretical sense, who's actually converting games into wins and who's not. And from this screen, these two systems would have picked 20 out of 21 teams the same. Wins over bubble would not have picked Stockton, but they would only been 2 spots out. They would have been like the next 2 on the board, kind of a situation. But NPI did pick them. Now the order is not the exact same, but it's pretty close. Like I think the top 10 are all still the top 10 in a slightly different order. But it's basically all of the same teams here. And you can see the list here. So some of those NJAC teams like Ramapo, right? The other computer systems were a little bit more skeptical. Like, are they actually that good of a team? The answer might be no, but wins over bubble says, yeah, but they converted a few more wins than would have been expected by just a team, on either side of that bubble. So maybe they didn't do it. Maybe they didn't earn extra style points along the way, but NPI wins over bubble is not really concerned about that at the end of the day. It's just concerned about, did you actually convert a game or two extra or not? So basically all these NJAC teams except Stockton still would have been in the mix. And we see only a small disagreement here. We're only talking about a couple of spots there. So I think it's just very interesting that once you look at it this way, almost all of the disagreement goes away. And just as a reminder, the backbone of this wins over bubble system are the efficiency ratings that we already saw. It's using the efficiency ratings of each team, comparing it to the bubble team, comparing it to the schedule they actually played, coming up with expected wins losses, and then looking at actual wins losses here. So it's taking an objective system and turning the hypothetical into actual and then ranking teams that way.
Well, it's very interesting to see how closely it aligns and just highlights the difference between rating and ranking the team versus rating and ranking the resume, right? And so this just highlights how much NPI really is there to rate and rank the resume, right? So it's casting a value judgment on what you've done against your schedule rather than making a broad value judgment on your quality as a team, right? So when you see Team A is above Team B in the NPI rankings, that's not necessarily it wouldn't be correct to say NPI says this team is better than that team, right? That's not actually what it's saying. What it's saying is NPI believes Team A's resume or what they've been able to achieve against their schedule is better than what Team B has been able to achieve against their schedule, right? That there's a big difference there. And I know I heard that sometimes, like during football season, and it's the high profile sport, first NPI, one out of the gate really. And sometimes I heard, NPI says this team is better than this team, right? And so that's kind of missing this important point of what NPI is doing and is trying to do versus, sometimes the way that might get interpreted.
Right. And if you allow me to run back an old bit, if we could rewind the system with all the knowledge we have now and replay the season, run it back, I'm skeptical that Carthage would go 21-6 and win the CCIW. Okay, but that doesn't matter, right? They won all those games. NPI, they were number 12 in the NPI. They were number 17 by wins over bubble. They put together a tournament-worthy resume. They actually won those games, and that's different than what might happen if we played more games in the future or if we tried to replay. So we're trying to do two different things. And you're right. NPI is not saying this team's better than that team. They're saying this resume is better than that resume. Let's take a look at the next screen. So similar to the last one, the teams that were maybe just outside of the picture here by NPI, where they would have ranked by wins over bubble. We just called out Stockton would have been number 23. The team that would have made it in their place was Trinity, Texas. That's actually a team that the other two computer systems liked quite well. So between wins over bubble, efficiency ratings, and Massey ratings, they had the unfortunate reality that NPI was selecting this, but any other metric, Trinity, Texas, probably would have been into the tournament. But here we see Trine on the outside. We see Virginia Wesleyan on the outside. These are teams that the overall system thought were quite good, but now we look at resume metrics and said, yeah, but at the end of the day, probably a win or two that you would have needed to get into that conversation or to get yourself into the tournament. Here, another, Gustavus would have been outside, and they would have liked to have one of those wins back. Anderson still outside, Whitworth still outside. So really, really stark how big of the difference is when we're looking at this and how much agreement we now get when comparing NPI to another resume type metric rather than a team quality metric.
And interesting to just look a little bit deeper into Trinity. We've looked a little bit deeper into some of these other examples. So within the NPI top 70, well, they did have one top 75 win that was over Hardin Simmons, who finished number 74. And their only other top 100 win was against Shriner, who they split with, right? So every other win Trinity had was outside that top 100. So interesting, maybe compared to a typical bubble team, they outperformed expectations, right? Enough to get kind of above that cut line. But I think ultimately it's a situation where, as NPI evaluated their schedule and their performance, it was just, probably a win too few. It's a little bit, I think, more difficult in this era to talk about. They had a strength of schedule problem, but ultimately, when you look at the lack of wins inside the top 100, and they're racking up a bunch of wins outside that top 100. I think probably they're one that we would be looking at as one of those SOS problems in the past.
Yeah, and if you have fewer, maybe fewer opportunities to win a top level game, then the ones that you do have matter a whole lot, and then you really want to avoid maybe some of those lower losses. Zach, one thing that I was thinking about as I was putting this together, thinking about like the best teams and the most deserving teams. Are you familiar with the 2004 film Miracle about the 1980 U.S. men's gold medal hockey team?
I'm familiar. I have seen the movie, yes.
There's a scene where Kurt Russell, who plays head coach Herb Brooks, and Noah Emmerich, who plays assistant coach Craig Patrick. In this scene, Herb Brooks is making like his first iteration of the roster, and assistant coach Patrick looks at it and says, "You're missing some of the best players." And Herb's response is something to the effect of, "Not looking for the best players, I'm looking for the right ones." And I think to some degree, that's what NPI is doing. It's not. We're not talking about, are you the best team? Are you not the best team? We're saying who's right for this tournament, who converted the wins and losses, not overall wins and losses, but against the teams, right? We're comparing the resumes. Who are the right teams that we're trying to go for? I think that's what NPI is doing. And I think this comparison with wins over bubble is showing that.
And I think that's appropriate. We're talking about access into the championship. I think some level of achievement is warranted. It's necessary, right? You need to, you don't just show like, oh, we were competitive against a really tough schedule, right? Because that's when it turns into a scheduling contest.
Yep.
When you need to show achievement, then it's on you to actually win the games.
Yep.
So if whether this year or in the past, we've talked about, oh, your schedule was too easy. You played too easy of a schedule.
Yep.
Well, if you're losing all those games to top teams, maybe your schedule's too hard, right? It's the other side of the same coin, right? It's the other side of the same coin, right? And I don't think we need to be afraid to say that it's possible to have too hard of a schedule and that you need to schedule easier, right? What you need to do is show what is your actual team quality, and you do that by getting wins, right? So advice that you've given in the past, I've heard you say several times, schedule where you think you are, right? Don't be scheduling where you're not going to win any games. Maybe don't even schedule where you're going to get all of the win
Yeah,
every
right.
game, but have a mix there where maybe you drop one or two, but you pick up one, two, three, kind of in that same range, and then you can say, yeah, we belong here because we have this set of
Yeah.
results,
Yeah.
right? And it's not, well, we went 0-5, but we were within 3 points,
Yeah.
right? And now a computer system that might be looking for best team is more likely to award that kind of
Yeah.
result, which NPI won't. But I think that's appropriate. Like we're looking for achievement based to gain access into the national
Yep.
tournament,
Yep. Every
right?
year
So
there's a team who wins darn near 20 games, and they haven't really beaten anyone inside the top 200 really. And that doesn't help you. That shouldn't help you. Everyone who's anyone is going to win most of those games anyway. So you have not set
right,
yourself
right.
apart from the field. We also see teams who maybe go out and they schedule all the top teams in their region and they go 1-6, and then they play in a bad conference and they don't pile wins, and they say, oh man, look at all these teams that are highly rated, we played against them. And you're like, yeah, you lost all of those games, and that's why you're not in the tournament conversation. There's a mix here, there's a balance. Figure out where you are as a team, schedule teams that are similar in quality to that, schedule the best teams that you can beat, and stretch yourself a little bit into that. I'm not saying you can beat 100% of the time. You're going to have to take some losses, but you need to find that balance between appropriate difficulty of schedule and winning games.
That's a lot of focus on the at-large cut line, the at-large group of teams map. But NPI is also responsible for not selecting, but seeding a very important group of teams, and that's the top 8 protected seeds. Not necessarily related to NPI, but sort of a new bracketing philosophy, bracketing principles that came online at the same time as NPI, and that was to take a look at the top 8 seeds and say that, these are our top seeds. They're going to be protected from each other until at least the quarterfinals, right? So we're not going to have any brackets of death where, 3 or 4 of these teams are on a collision course to meet, by the Sweet 16. No, that can't happen. None of these teams could meet any one of the other top 8 teams until at least that sectional final. So just by way of review, NPI had the top 8 as Wesleyan, NYU, UW Platteville, Trinity, Connecticut, Emory, UW La Crosse, Randolph-Macon, and Tufts. Now, Matt, here on the screen, we've got a screenshot of something that I put together in the moment as the season ended. So I do have the information here from Jacob Shower's
Excellent ratings.
ratings.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I wanted to look just okay. Here's the top 8 that we got from NPI. How does that compare not only to computer rankings, but I included here also the D3Hoops.com top 25 poll. Right? Who did the human voters say were the top 8 going into the tournament, right? So give not only the computer ratings but also the human poll. And Matt, I think here we also see quite a bit of agreement. 6 of the top 8 were unanimous, whether we were talking about NPI, the human top 25 poll, or the 3 computer ranking systems represented here. Uh, but again, I don't
Yeah.
really think of any outliers here. I mean, go back to what, the 2024 tournament. I think Widener was a top 4 overall
Yeah.
seed, and I think wouldn't have really fit in this sort of comparison, right? If you were looking at where they were voted in the top 25 poll, if you were looking at where they maybe were in the Massey ratings, like
Yeah.
that was a bit of an outlier. I think NPI here gave us some pretty satisfying results as well. The D3Hoops.com top 25 poll will say agreed.
Yeah.
With La Crosse, who was one of the 2 that was not unanimous. The other that was not unanimous was Tufts. The top 25 poll had 7 of the 8, but they would have had St. John's in there, while Tufts was down at number 13. The D3 Datacast efficiency ratings did agree with Tufts, but had Wash U in the 8th spot, while UW La Crosse was down at 16. And that was actually the biggest disagreement between any of the other systems here. Jacob Shower had 6 of the 8, but St. John's and Wash U in the 7 and 8 spot, while La Crosse was 9 and Tufts was 12. The Massey ratings would have had Hampton Sydney in that 8th spot, and instead of Tufts, which was down at 12 for Massey. Man, again, I think we're talking about the same kind of neighborhood, right? As we were tracking that final spot, it was really coming down to Tufts and Illinois Wesleyan. But whether you're talking about any of the teams here, I think had they come out that way, it would have been seen as pretty reasonable. I don't see any wild departures here, whether we're talking about computer ratings, NPI, or top 25 poll. Anything that sticks out to you as we, go from looking at the cut line to the very top.
Yeah, just adding context with wins over bubble here, because we didn't have that at the time that you pulled this, which was at the end of the season. So wins over bubble would have agreed with NPI in order on the top 1 through 6 teams, same name, same order. Then NPI number 8, Tufts, would have slotted in as the number 7 team. So that was the one mismatch. And then kind of the one outlier, NPI number 16, Hamilton, would have been the number 8 team by wins over bubble. And they were like the number 9 team on D3 Datacast efficiency. So from that standpoint, that wasn't a huge outlier there. Then if you expanded wins over bubble to the top 16 picture, they would have agreed on 15 of the 16 names. Montclair State would have been the one that was out, and Wash U would have been the one that was in, and Wash U was the next team by NPI. So when you're talking about the top 8 or the top 16, again, wins over bubble and NPI are talking about specifically the exact same teams almost. Yeah.
All right, so that's a lot of nitty gritty, Matt. Let's go back high level. What do you think some of the big takeaways? What should people walk away from knowing about NPI? And let's just start with this. Sometimes people like us who can explain NPI, we get mistaken for people who are advocating for it. I think so far there's been a lot of positive things I think to say about it. I think there's been a lot of positive reactions from outside of what we have to say. It seems to have come and gone with very little controversy. Aside from the fact that maybe it just doesn't work at all, regardless of dial settings for football, but that's a different beast. I think it seems like a lot of the other sports have been very satisfied with where they're at. I didn't hear a lot of complaints about NPI during basketball season. Again, but just to separate education from advocacy for NPI in particular, it seems to be working out pretty well. What are some takeaways? As we head into year 2, what are some things to think about here with NPI, specifically to men's basketball?
First of all, echoing what you said about men's basketball, if you were kind of more of just a casual fan, you show up at the games, you like your team, you check out the bracket when it's released, you probably wouldn't notice a difference. If you didn't know the committee system before and you didn't know that they were changing to NPI and you didn't follow the weekly releases, you would have been like, yeah, these are the types of teams and the types of resumes that probably would have gotten in at a high level before. So I don't think there was a big change. I think that's not that specifically the exact teams, but we're not talking about, suddenly those 24-1 teams that play nobody's schedules are getting in. You're not getting like 500 teams in just because they played a top schedule. It's basically the same types of teams with the same types of resumes. I think that's a good thing. But what are the big takeaways here? I think it's true what we've been talking about. No, NPI is not trying to select the best teams. It's not trying to replicate the Massey ratings. It's not trying to be an efficiency ratings. It's a resume metric, not a team quality metric. You might disagree that that's the way to select teams. That's fine. But I think that's what it is, right? There's going to be disagreement with other computer systems. And I use disagreement in scare quotes, right? It's not going to order the teams the same because they're doing different things. I happen to think that for men's and women's basketball, and the committees did a good job of setting the dials to make the system work. I think it did a good job, and I think it works. And I think it's a good iteration on the previous system. It might not be the ideal system forever and ever, amen, but I think for right now it's good. And what it's doing as a resume metric, it's saying how many games did you win and who did you win them against. That's what the old system was doing, but now we're not asking a committee to take two separate things and try to weigh them on the scales and say, well, what does this SOS mean with this winning percentage? And we're not really allowed to dive in too deep and say the individual games. NPI, I think, does that pretty well and fairly elegantly for what it is. We heard
not to mention, congratulations, you got the last regional ranking spot in Region 2, whereas oh sorry, you were number 8 in Region 7. We can't really give you any credit for that.
Yes, exactly. Just doing away with maybe the region delineations on who's ranked and who's not, I think maybe what was a big bonus. And that's just, in some ways, that was a distraction. Like people like us would focus on that and talk about that and disagree with things like that too. And like at the end of the day, that's not what it's about. Like who's number 6 in Region 2? Like who cares, right? Like let's pick the teams and let's move on. But one thing we heard former committees chairs say as they were trying to do these these balancing acts of between strength of schedule and winning percentage and wins versus regionally ranked opponents is, at the end of the day, it's not a scheduling contest, right? So just because you stack up an SOS, you got to win the games too. But what NPI does is winning matters and who you play matters. The specific games that you win or lose matters. If you beat a high quality team, you get that extra quality win bonus. If you lose to a really bad team, that NPI is going to drag you down. That might affect which types of wins you can drop, because now your NPI bar is too low overall. And so a win is now helping you when it would have hurt you if you had just won that low quality game. If you had won that, then that terrible result could have been maybe dropped altogether. So it's not a scheduling contest. The specific games you play and win or lose do matters. And I think, Zach, something you alluded to earlier in this video is how your strength of schedule is kind of allocated across your schedule kind of determines the margin for error that you have to win or lose those games. If you have a bunch of high quality games, you can take a few losses in there. If you get a few wins, right, those will offset each other. You'll get the quality win bonus. If you don't have very many quality teams, if you have a weaker schedule, you take 1, 2, 3, 4 losses, like you might be just out of the picture altogether. So that strength of schedule gives you that margin for error. And I think that's a really good way to think about what the strength of schedule does for you, is it allows you to lose more games and still be in that mix. And I think good teams will still be rated highly by NPI, but the agreement on the exact order should not be expected, right? We shouldn't expect that 1 through 16 NPI are going to be 1 through 60 Massey ratings, or the Pool C 1 through 21 efficiency ratings are going to match Pool C 1 through 21 NPI. They're trying to do different things. One's a team quality metric, one's a resume metric. Just understand that they're doing different things before we quibble that maybe they're picking different teams or they're not picking the right ones.
Yeah, we go back to the previous system, Matt, with winning percentage, the strength of schedule, and results versus regionally ranked and head to head. Like when you distill all those criteria down to what they were trying to do, I think they were trying to do the right thing. But as we talk time and time again, like the committee had very bad tools at their disposal, right? They were well intentioned, trying to get at what you want to see out of ranking and selecting teams. But they were just very bad at giving a very bad tool set for the committee to do that, right? So you just went through it. NPI is very much trying to do some of the same things that the previous system was trying to do, right? Look for teams who have good wins, who have a good number of wins, who have this, and this system does a better job of giving some description to how bad are your losses, right? Because you're how much you're helped or hurt by who you beat or who you lose to is going to matter, whether it's number 1 or number 100 or number 200 or number 400. That kind of granularity was lost in the previous system. So again, right, is it perfect? Maybe not. But I think this is at least a better tool set than what we had before. And hey, if someone can bring forth an even better tool set, I think we'd all be for that too. But hey, I think overall step in the right direction so far. And in terms of expecting some sort of agreement, I mean, there's a reason we like looking at Massey and looking at the efficiency ratings we have, and are so glad that there's now Jacob Shower's own rankings, right? Because it's not about one being right. There's a lot to be gained in looking at how the various systems view a team, right? Because if there's one outlier, that might say something. If all three seem to agree, that says something, right? So there's something to be gained in the aggregate as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I knew Drew Pasteur used to publish kind of the computer consensus rankings as well, taking a bunch of these things and mixing it with the top 25 poll. And I think that's useful just to kind of aggregate some of this stuff. For my own usage, I'll just take our efficiency ratings, the Massey ratings, and kind of average them together and say, what does that say? And what does that tell me? There's probably more truth in combining them than just looking at one or two individually. If you're there. So, Zach, we kind of posed the question of, did NPI pick the right teams to start the episode? We should probably answer that question a little bit more specifically. I would say the answer for me this year, looking at men's basketball, is yes, NPI picked the right teams.
Okay.
Is that you? Would you say the same thing?
I would say NPI did not pick the wrong teams.
Yeah, I mean that's maybe a valid
Right, because I
answer as
mean that's the
well.
thing.
Yeah,
We can look at, well, Massey would have had this group of teams in this team, right? I mean, we're talking about the same group of teams. I think if let's say we didn't know exactly where NPI was going to come, all those teams kind of plus or minus 10 on the bubble, they probably all would have been watching the selection show. Right now, that's interesting because the last year of the old committee system, we had a team that got in that wasn't watching the selection show, right? So
right.
we'll call it a step in the right direction. You can quibble over who's in and who's out. I think are they the right teams? I think that's an unanswerable question.
Sure.
All we can say is it did not get the wrong teams.
Yeah, there was no unreasonable team. All the teams were and should have been in the mix, and I think it did a good job of what it was trying to do.
All right, let's wrap this one up, Matthew.
All right, Zach. Glad to talk about NPI. We're going to be back in July with another episode. If you want to hit us up with any mailbag questions, you can answer those. We'll be having kind of an ongoing summer series mailbag question. So hit us up either in the comments below at D3Datacast on Twitter/X. We're also on Blue Sky, and we are also on, I think, something else that I'm not mentioning. Hit us up at
Instagram, Facebook.
patreon.com/D3Datacast as well. All right, Zach, we're out of here. We had a good episode.
All right,
Good
good
job,
job,
team.
team.